Finkel. Community Service Society Senior Director, Carrie Tracy. And now, please welcome the 57th Governor of the great state of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul.
Good morning and thank you. I don't need to tell any of you that New Yorkers are facing a crisis of affordability. From the gas pump to the grocery bills to the monthly rent, and yes, to the utility bills. The costs of daily life just keep going up and up and up. And I'm particularly concerned about how these costs are affecting our seniors. You know, these are people living on fixed income. You know, they've earned their wages, and now they have a finite amount of money coming in, mostly from their Social Security checks. These are our parents, our grandparents, our neighbors. But what is so distressing to me is that the number of older New Yorkers who are now living in poverty has jumped over 50%. Think about that. At this point in their life, when they should be enjoying the golden years, after a lifetime of work and raising families and contributing to their communities, they find themselves in poverty and struggling to pay their bills. And these are the ones who've got more prescription drugs more prescription drugs than the rest of the population. They have medical bills. They're trying to get to the doctor. And as I mentioned, utility bills. You know, you keep the heat warm in the wintertime. You have to keep it turned up. As much as you'd like to keep your costs down, you have to turn the heat up. And that's why, from the very beginning, my administration has been laser focused on doing everything in our power to keep costs down for people of all ages. You think about what we just proposed in our executive budget, tax cuts, the largest tax rate reduction for the middle class in 70 years. Our inflation rebate, which says because everybody paid so much more for everything, we collected more in sales tax, resulting in an additional $3 billion. I want to put that back in people's pockets. Covering the cost of child care, helping people with little kids with our child and infant tax program. Covering the cost of meals in schools. And there's so much more. But the ultimate goal is not to just help New Yorkers get by, but actually to get ahead. But all of a sudden, when something happens, when we're trying to put money back in these pockets, and there's other forces taking money out of the pockets, now we've got a problem. And I'm talking about efforts to raise utilities here in the city of New York for 3 million ratepayers by anywhere from 11 to 13 to 14%. Shocking. And this is a real hit on families. They didn't budget for this. They weren't planning for this. And these bills going up upwards of $500 a year. I'm trying to put $500 back in their pockets because of the inflation rebate, and it's going to go right out the door to pay this bill? Come on, how are they supposed to get ahead? This is intolerable to me. And I want to say this. I've talked to too many parents. I've gone to local restaurants, go to the shopping malls. I talk to everybody. Anybody who'll talk to me, I talk to. They're proud to live in this state. They love this state. They want to raise their kids here. But it's getting harder and harder. And I've got to just say, we're listening to them. And that's why today I'm calling on the Department of Public Service to reject Con Ed's proposal for these exorbitant rate increases. Here I have a letter that I'm sending to the DPS chair and CEO, Rory Christian, that I'm going to sign right now, that expresses my strong objection to what they're proposing to do New Yorkers at this time when they just don't have the money to pay these bills. I'll sign it now, make it official. There. This is a statement of my priorities as governor to protect our citizens from the costs of everything going up, but starting with their utility bills. And I'm going to make sure they understand how important this is to me. But I'm not stopping there. I'm also directing the Department of Public Service to conduct a first-of-its-kind audit of management compensation across the board. Because a lot of people are saying, why am I paying this when they're getting paid this much from that money. I want to make sure that they're being responsible in how they use our ratepayer dollars. So the burden is already heavy. You just listen to people. You listen to someone who's switching to dirtier heating oil because he can't afford his gas bills. We are trying to transition to a clean energy future. So raging forest fires that we saw in our own state don't ever match what we saw in Los Angeles. That the flooding events that we see elsewhere don't become the norm here in New York. The extreme weather we're experiencing, worse flooding, worse extreme temperatures, hottest temperatures, coldest temperatures, it's all happening right now in our state. And the culprit is climate change. And we are standing up strong against that. I don't want people to have to continue using dirtier fossil fuel-based energy because they can't afford these bills. That's where we have to stand up and say no more. Or should families be dipping into their emergency savings just to pay these bills? I'm going to continue making New York more affordable. I want you to know that. I'm a fighter. I'm going to stand up and say no. Go back to the drawing board and figure this out, but you're not going to get that kind of rate increase from our hardworking New Yorkers, particularly our seniors who are represented by Beth Finkel here today, representing AERP, who has a message to tell all of us about what this does to seniors. And if we don't start paying attention, then shame on us. They deserve a better life. They've given enough to New Yorkers. They've given enough to their families. They've given enough to their communities. And now it's time for us to start taking care of them. With that, let me bring up Beth Finkel and thank her for her great support for our seniors across the state. Beth, thank you. Thank you.
So on behalf of the almost 750,000 members of AARP that are right here in New York City, we are really appalled with this possible increase. And we really want to thank the governor for her leadership in opposing the Con Ed rate increase proposal. We need to do better to make sure that people can afford their energy bills now in the middle of winter, but also in the summer. We know that it's getting hotter and hotter, and we know that people have to stay cool. This is also a health issue, because if you can't stay warm, and if you're too hot in the summer, you're going to end up getting sick, and you're not going to be able to be in good health. It also puts, there are already 500,000 Con Ed customers that are behind 60 days or more on their bills. And they are so vulnerable to service disconnection. And they owe $1 billion. Think about that. How did we end up in that spot to begin with? And this is all about things not being affordable. So glad that the governor has called this out and taken a strong position about fighting this. Just yesterday, the Center for Urban Future released a report that said that New York City is now home to 1.4 million people that are 65 and older. And I'll tell you what's really upsetting, and the governor mentioned this before, 18% of the city's older adults live in poverty, below the poverty line. Again, that is unconscionable. And these high utility rates are contributing to it. So, Governor, I want to thank you again so much for working on this. As you said, older adults are on fixed income. And actually what we found that is that 60% of the older people that were in that study said that they don't have any retirement income. So what does that mean? How do they ever keep up? More and more people are going to fall into the people who are in jeopardy of being disconnected. We can't allow that to happen. So, Governor, again, thank you for being a fighter on this issue. We love working on this issue with you, and we want to continue to stand with you on affordability. Thank you. Oh, and sorry, and I want to introduce Carrie Tracy, who's from the CSS Community Service Society. Great work for New Yorkers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to thank Governor Hochul for inviting us to speak today about this very important issue. The Community Service Society of New York has worked with and for New Yorkers since 1843 to promote economic opportunity and champion an equitable state and city. These proposed rate hikes would be disastrous for low and moderate income New Yorkers. CSS conducts an annual survey of New York City residents called the Unheard Third. And in the most recent survey, we found that over a quarter of low-income New Yorkers, those living in or near the poverty level, reported having no rainy day savings. About 1 in every 6 low-income New Yorkers would not be able to meet an unexpected emergency expense like these rate hikes. Almost 45% of households living near and in poverty worried about making ends meet all the time or most of the time. And women, particularly Latina and Black women and families with children, are more likely to experience this kind of financial insecurity. So we'd like to thank Governor Hochul for her strong defense of families in New York and fighting these rate hikes. Thank you.
This concludes our program.
As we discussed today, I'm standing up for New York City ratepayers against the obscenely high rate increase proposed by Con Ed. I've directed a letter to be sent to the head of the Department of Public Service and asked them to re-examine this, asking Con Ed also to go back to the drawing board and come up with a different plan that does not hit our seniors particularly so hard with these rate increases. Also looking at executive compensation, which I want to find out if that's a driver of these rate increases as well. So at a time we're fighting for affordability, it's time to stand up and use my voice and my position to call out when I feel that people's pocketbooks are being jeopardized. Any questions?
We are going to take off-topic questions. Before we do that, does anyone have on-topic questions about ratepayers and affordability? Garland.
Good morning, Governor.
Good morning.
In terms of the action that you've taken today, what can New Yorkers expect for a timeline? Because there's obviously anxiety with the pending rate increase. So after this action today, what does that timeline look like between the governor's office and Con Edison?
The traditional timeline is actually almost a year. So this is the very beginning of this. They put forth the rate increase. They have to justify this. There's public comment period. There's public hearings. So this is the beginning of a lengthy process. But I wanted to make my feelings, my objections clear at the outset so they can take the time to go back and get out their pencils and figure out something else that does not hit our ratepayers so hard.
Dan?
Just to read a letter from Con Ed to the Public Service Commission Secretary saying that part of the justification is requirements for clean heat in new commercial and residential buildings. Could you explain the link between your party, you yourself, the clean energy policies that is more expensive than dirty fuel, and the need for a rate increase in utility bills?
When you examine the real cost drivers behind this, I encourage you to look at the property tax increases for Con Ed in the city of New York. That is what our analysis shows is the real driver.
Okay, but they cite clean
They can
energy.
cite all they want. I'm telling you what we believe the truth to be. It is a factor, but to increase rates by this percentage is not supported by that. In fact, I have a letter from Con Ed saying they support our initiatives. I can bring that out for you as well if we're going to go letter to letter here. But I don't think I need to. I'm standing with the consumers of New York.
Anything else on energy affordability? Yeah, Vivek.
Yeah, I'm Samantha from the city. I was going to grant property taxes as the biggest driver, which you mentioned. So what are you doing to lower property taxes?
We are talking to the city about that, and my question was, if these are newer property taxes because of the investments they're making to implement our clean energy legislation, that's worth having a conversation between our budget office and the city, just to talk about that. I'm not looking to give a tax break on somebody's property taxes just to do that, because everybody else will have to make up the difference. But I want to find out, is the true driver that there's additional investments being made and additional costs incurred to comply? Because I do want compliance. I do want to make sure that we are transitioning off fossil fuel power. And I'll tell you this, it is enormously frustrating to me at a time when we're trying to become more resilient against climate change and focus on renewables, that we have Washington telling us we're basically shutting down the offshore wind industry. That is not consistent with our objectives. And we have to now navigate around that variable because we have been counting on powering tens of thousands of homes, as we've already started, but to have no more licenses being granted with that area where we're counting on plentiful energy coming from creates another challenge for us. We're up to the challenge, but that's a curveball that one would have not foreseen at this time. So working through all that.
Great. Anything else? All right. We'll get to you at the end. Let's move to off topics. We'll start with Andrew.
Governor, can you walk us through how you learned that the Justice Department is dropping the charges against the mayor? And once you learned it, how concerned are you that, as some critics have put it, Mayor Adams is now a wholly owned subsidiary of Donald Trump, and that President Trump is essentially going to have the leverage to determine everything that's done in New York City?
It's an interesting premise. I found out the way most New Yorkers get their news from mainstream media. I read it in the news accounts, which I always hope are accurate. Okay. That being said, I'm going to continue doing what I've done since September when all this started. You know, I worked with the mayor to make sure that he brought in a different team to manage the operations of government. There is a new police commissioner. I spend time with her. I have confidence in her. Crime is going down, on the subways in particular. I want to make sure that we had the resources to get the housing plan over the finish line. That's why I came in at the 11th hour with $1 billion to help New Yorkers get some relief from the high cost of rent because there's so little supply. We're working on making sure that the subway system is not a rolling homeless shelter, making sure we have the beds and resources and support we need. I had to work to help clean house. I said, let's get this city stabilized. That worked successfully. And I'm going to continue working toward that path. My objective is not who's sitting in that office and what's going on there. It's about what's happening on the streets. Are people being served? And that is always going to be my primary motivation in what I do.
Henry?
Governor, just following up with Andrew, you've been unafraid to criticize Republicans when they don't stand up to Donald Trump. We've already seen recent instances on immigration, on funding for the city, when Mayor Adams has not stood up to Donald Trump, at least not publicly. So are you concerned as you go through this Trump era that Adams is now ill-equipped, that he cannot stand up to the president?
You're dealing in hypotheticals. If you come up with a true example, then we'll talk about anything. But I'm talking about, I'm not engaging in speculation about the motivation of anyone here. All I'm saying is, I've got a job to do. I've got to worry about people catching bird flu, okay? I'm more anxious about steel and aluminum tariffs cutting down factories in the state of New York and thousands of jobs. So I will do plenty of standing up to that administration and willingly calling out Republicans who are not speaking out. The mayor needs to stay focused on public safety in the city, making sure our streets are safe, making sure our streets are clean, making sure that people feel confident that this city is continuing to head in the right direction. That has to be his laser focus. And I'm going to make sure that that continues to be the focus, because it has to be what we're all working toward to protect New Yorkers.
Respectfully, Governor, we are not dealing in hypotheticals. He's been openly criticized for not protecting the city's sanctuary status, and he's been openly criticized for not saying anything when the Trump administration threatened to pull all sorts of federal funding. Those are two specific examples. Are you worried that's going to continue to happen?
I will tell you this. I will proudly stand up to fight to make sure that the resources that we've counted on from the federal government continue. I did an event with Senator Gillibrand at a school on the Upper East Side on Sunday morning to call out well, this was when they were talking about dismantling the Department of Education, but I'm very concerned about Pell Grants. I'm concerned about Title I funding, which is over $5.5 billion that we get in the state of New York. I will continue to say, don't cut us off. We also send still more money to Washington than we get back in services. We get $93 billion a year from the federal government. And I want to establish a relationship of working together and not having to be standing up and fighting every minute. Let's just stop the fighting and continue providing the services that New Yorkers and Americans need across the board. I will be that voice.
Hi, Governor. On the special elections bill, why did you choose to hold up the bill to extend the time frame for special elections, and what is the real objective here?
I don't introduce bills. It's not the role of the governor. I didn't introduce a bill.
You told them not. You expressed to them that they shouldn't take it up for a vote.
Ben, you weren't called upon.
Well, I have a different question.
Okay, well, you pick one or the other, but you don't get a twofer.
In the back, Marla.
Okay.
Yeah, Governor, back to the charges against the mayor. What do you think that this does to New Yorkers' trust of the justice system, that a president can just decide who gets tried and who doesn't?
Are you watching what's coming out of Washington? I mean, my head is spinning at all the overturning of traditional practice, including supporting funding allocations previously made by a co-equal level of government, the Congress, and ignoring those. We're talking about executive orders that are overruling everything that we've taken as sacred and saying they're going to overturn decisions by courts. So all I can say is there's a lot swirling around right now. This is certainly one element that's swirling, but there's an awful lot out here. And I'm going to stay focused on what will hurt New Yorkers, possibly, and stand up and use my voice to fight that.
This is an election year when a lot of people are going to use this to weigh their decision on it.
Right, and New Yorkers are awfully smart, and they're awfully savvy, and they're paying attention. And I encourage all of them to make the decision on who they want to lead them in city government in 5 months from now. And that's what an election's all about. You don't need a governor telling people in New York City how to vote. They're smart. They've done this before. I have confidence in New Yorkers.
Ben.
Are you considering using the power in the charter to remove Mr. Adams? Are you considering using the power in the state constitution to ask Tish James to appoint a special prosecutor? I guess I'm just curious about that because the letter from the Assistant Attorney General states that the indictment prevented him from, doing more of an immigration crackdown. Are you concerned about that?
This is from the Department of Justice that we have right now. Okay. I just encourage everybody to look at what has happened to our federal government closely. I'm not sure there's anything to back up anything that is being said there. I don't know what went into writing it. I have no idea what the genesis of all that is. And to suggest that I should, at this point in time, just use my powers to say, despite what the voters said when you ran 3.5 years ago, I'm overturning that election. That does not feel like something that's very democratic. That's why I'm not going to go there.
What about your view of the state election? I'm curious about that too.
When bills are introduced and they're passed and they get on the pile of my desk with about 800 to 1,000 bills, depending on the year, that's when I pay attention to them.
Not about congestion pricing?
Congestion pricing does not come out of legislation related to this.
In this broader soup of things that are going on between you and the federal government.
There's a lot going on, Ben.
Tanaki?
I also have a question about the special election issue. You yourself won a special election back in 2011 to represent the Buffalo area in Congress. Would the people of that congressional district have been better served if there was never a special election in the May of 2011 and that special election was consolidated into the general?
Hell yes. That was an awfully short time frame to have to run an election in 7 counties. More time is very helpful for voters to get to know someone. I was known in 1 county out of 7. So I would just say there's a whole process, even the idea of having individuals not selected to a primary system. I mean, other states are doing it differently. Other states actually, 15 states allow up to 669 days to fill a vacancy, which is obscenely long. I wouldn't support that. But, it's just interesting. A lot of this generated by the Republicans who, they have a press conference every time I sneeze, criticizing something I'm doing. She's starting a pandemic by sneezing. They're just so hyperbolic that you really have to just tune it out because this is all they do. And there's no substance behind it. All I know is that every time there is an election reform bill that comes out there, whether it's early voting, whether it's the John Lewis Voting Rights Act or the odd-even bill, they act like this is going to be the end of society and democracy in America as we know it. So I just encourage everybody to just consider the source and the motivation behind what they've been doing. They're very good at it, but I don't pay attention.
Last one, Sam.
After having those conversations with President Trump about congestion pricing, what's your reaction to him telling the Post that he wants to cut a deal with you to end congestion pricing, and are you scheduled to talk to him again anytime soon? Not
scheduled. We did say we're going to talk again. The Democratic and Republican governors gather in Washington next week for the National Governors Association. There's time in the White House. There's time for meetings. So, that could be the next opportunity, but I'm looking forward to conveying that as every day goes by and congestion pricing is in place, the results are more positive. And I don't think a lot of people, including the president, would necessarily have access to that data, which I'm happy to share, about the reduced drive times for those who are paying the 40% reduction in the fee that I negotiated of $9. When you hear, a lot of it's anecdotes, which I need data, and we're waiting for the data, but there's a lot of people who are saying their commute is shorter. I can wake up a little bit later, spend a little more time with my kids. Those are the ones who at first were very resistant to this, but also in the communities that see less traffic. And I'm a walker. I see it myself. I'm all over the city, and I'm seeing a dramatic decrease, especially in our areas, particularly in Lower Manhattan, that were particularly egregiously crowded. And also, anecdotally, one gentleman told me that his child has asthma and would always be coughing when he went outdoors. And he says the less traffic is making his son's lungs even healthier right now. And so there's a lot of positive attributes. I want to collect data. The president's data-driven. He knows the city. He knows that congestion in front of Trump Tower is not good, and I'm going to be able to point to some very positive benefits of it. So I will do my very best, is all I'll say on that topic, and wish me well.
Are you worried he's going to hold something over you, though, to kill it? Like he's holding these charges over Mayor Adams?
I cannot speculate on what his thoughts are. I'm going to go in and just make a persuasive argument on why it should stay.
Okay, thank you.
The New York Times said that you spoke to legislative leaders and you told them, quoting the New York Times, that you were seeking to gain leverage in separate negotiations with President Trump over the future of the state's new congestion pricing program. This is related to the special election.
No, I didn't say that.
Okay. Do you have confidence in Mayor Eric Adams?
Confidence to be the mayor. I will continue working with him to make sure that we focus on our mutual priorities, which must be public safety, clean streets, making sure that we build more housing, making sure we deal with the homeless problem, closing more cannabis shops. I've got a lot to do. Mayor Adams is the mayor, and I want to make sure we can get back to work.
Okay, Darla, thank you. Thank you again, Governor Hochul. You shared with us that you heard the news about the DOJ's decision, just like we all did in mainstream media. After you read about that, after you learned of this information, can you please tell us whether or not you have spoken with Eric Adams? Share with us what you can share about that conversation. And I think the direct question from New Yorkers is asking you to address if you think if the mayor's objectivity to the New Yorkers is now compromised. I think that is the specific question that some people want answered. If you think his objectivity is compromised.
No, I did not have a conversation, so there's no content to disclose. And again, I will reiterate, I do not disclose the content of private conversations, whether it's with the president on down to my husband, okay? I'm not going there. Do I think he's compromised? That is speculation. I don't know. I don't know whether anyone is compromised in that situation. I truly do not know. I have to believe that the mayor is going to put the interests of New York City first, and I'm going to continue monitoring the situation as I've had to do since last fall. This is a very serious job, and the city of New York needs full-time attention. You know, it is my hope that after, you know, this issue, there's more attention now back on the minutia of running the city, and that's important to me. I just want to have a partner who has the same priorities I do, and that is focused on the people of the city and nothing else, nothing else. And so, you know, that's what I'm hoping to get back to.
Thanks, everybody.
Do you have any benchmarks for what you'd like to see, similar to last time you wanted him to clear house? Do you have any specific benchmarks or marks his administration needs to hit to restore trust?
Trust is a nebulous concept, right? I don't know what's going to, I mean, we're talking about people's emotions and how they feel. Since I entered government under unusual circumstances, entered the governorship under unusual circumstances, I knew how important it is to restore trust. I did everything I could to bring in new people, to put in systems in place, to bring in outside counsel, to listen to any claims about untoward activity toward employees. So I understand what it's like when you have to change a culture and rebuild trust because of what I inherited. I encourage the mayor to examine all of his actions and know that he's going to be under a spotlight to make sure that people have confidence that there has been no reason why he would not take a certain action, that he has to demonstrate to New Yorkers that he's putting them first, above all. And that includes in his relationships with the White House. That's how it has to be.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.